Welcome to my life and our second visit with Sister Martina Stegman, actually a continued visit out here at the Dominican Sisters of Peace Center on Drainer Road in Oxford. Sister Martina has been a member of this order for over 65 years. She is one of their spiritual directors, and we were just starting to talk about her experience as a teacher back in Kansas at the second assignment that you had. Mm-hmm. Let's pick up on that. You said that was a little bigger school than what you had before. Mm-hmm. Tell us more about what that was like.
It was just bigger in numbers, but a very Catholic community again.
But you still had 4 grades?
I had 4 grades, yeah.
How many kids were in a classroom?
I had 30.
So that was about twice the size of what you had before.
And it was quite comfortable. I mean, I was used to it and had 3 years practice. So very fine families I was teaching. Parents were very cooperative.
And this, of course, was right around the time of the Korean War, so I imagine some of their parents were involved with that.
Perhaps. It wasn't real big in my life. I mean, I guess I was too engrossed in what I was doing.
Right.
That I didn't. But I did have a brother in the Korean War.
How was that experience at that school compared to the first one?
It was a little more, not as poor. It was a little more in civilization. You know, the other one was kind of in the boonies. This was more a bigger town and more settled.
Now, by this time, you were reaching the point of making your final vows.
That's right.
Tell us what was going through your mind about that.
Well, I questioned, am I ready, or would I go ahead? And I was. There were not too many struggles. Of course, I didn't know what the future would hold, but I was pretty solid. I didn't question it much.
Tell us about taking your vows. What happened?
You just simply invited your family to come to this special occasion on June 10th of the year 1950. It was merely making your promises for a year. It was just a year at a time at that time. Now, wait a minute, this is final.
The final vows.
That was for life, yeah. That
was a bigger contract.
It was, yeah. It was for until death.
In a way,
and we
though,
received our ring.
In a way, though, was that a load off your mind, just having that by you?
It was, yes, because we were out of the junior aid. You know, the junior aid was in a formation of a certain mistress, a sister in charge, and she was rather strict. So I thought once you're really full-fledged, it would be so much easier and better.
Okay.
And it was.
Good. Now, did that change your teaching assignment at all?
No, it was the same. You were assigned every year.
And where did you go after that?
I went to another little town, but this time I only had 2 grades.
2 grades? Yeah. How many kids were in your class?
I think there were about 35, but only 2 grades. That was snap. It was a new school. It was exciting, and it was close to home. It was where we used to shop for groceries. It was La Crosse, Kansas, and I had just this one room. I remember my father was kind of prejudiced about this little town.
For or against?
Against. He said, now that's about the worst place you could go. And I said, oh no, Dad, they have a new school and I only have 2 grades. So it was fun. And then there were more sisters on that mission. We each had just 2 grades, so there were 4 teachers instead of 2.
Were you a little worried about Dad, seeing as how you lost your mother when you were 12? How he was doing?
You know, in the course of about 2 years after I had entered in 53, I believe, he moved to Nebraska. He moved to another farm.
Oh, so he was still in farming?
He sold the farm and bought. Somehow I think he was moving from his grief. He wasn't facing it. Because it was hard for the little brothers to to be taken care of in a strange land.
That was a family farm that went back a long time. Was that kind of sad to you that he did that?
Well, I sort of left it up to him, but no, he didn't. I had no attachments.
Yeah.
But I felt sorry for the little brothers.
So what special thing do you remember about the school you were in with only 2 grades and 35 kids?
It was fun. It was, and then I lived with 5 sisters, which was a bigger community, and it was much more supportive.
Now, I remember when I attended a Catholic grade school as well, and I remember back then you went to Mass every day. That's how you started your day.
Right.
Was that how it was for them too?
That's right. All those years, we had that same program. Yeah.
And how many years were you in that school?
Just 2. Wait a minute. No, just 1.
They kept you moving.
Because I had a brother that lived in town. And in those days, you were not, it was not feasible to put you near your relatives. So I was shipped to the following year. I was just there 1 year. Could that be?
Now, did they have a
I
little
think so.
convent there for you?
Yes, it was
teachers?
right next door, the
Okay.
house. So I went to Oklahoma, Sapulpa.
That was a big move.
That was.
Oklahoma.
Wait a minute. No, I didn't either. I went to Sharon, Kansas, another school with just 2 grades at another Catholic school.
And how long did they keep you there?
2 years. That was kind of my average, 2 years.
You just couldn't settle down, could you?
No, I was ready to stay, but they just shipped me around.
And you were still teaching elementary school,
Yes,
obviously.
Similar.
Okay,
Yeah, it
so-
was, and then after Sharon, then I went to Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and then I was given kindergarten
In Oklahoma.
in Sapulpa,
So
Oklahoma.
how did that come about? Did they call you and did the
No,
Mother Superior call you in the office and say, how would you like to go to Oklahoma?
No, you got the assignment read just like the other times. No, I didn't. It was a total surprise. I was going to college yet that summer, and we got the news of where we were going.
Were you working on your master's degree or? you going
It was
to
still a
college?
bachelor's.
Oh, okay.
And we were given the assignments for all those. There were about 22 of us going to school. And we got our assignments there. And it was a real surprise to be teaching kindergarten after 8 years of elementary.
How'd you feel about moving so far from home, though?
Well, that part didn't bother me.
Yeah.
But it was the grade level. I mean, in those days, kindergarten didn't have any books. You had to create the subject.
Wow.
So that was a little challenge. But they had 40 of them.
40 kindergarten
And
kids.
it was just in the morning, and only 8 Catholics in the whole bunch.
Oh, my.
The others were Baptists.
Okay, we're going to pause for just a moment, but we'll be right back to hear more of the story. Back with Sister Martina Stegman. You were telling us about your Oklahoma assignment and the kindergartners that you had there.
Yes.
Not all of them were Catholic.
That's right. It was a minority. There were only 8 Catholics in those 40. The others were from other denominations, mostly Baptists. And it was in the 60s, and during Kennedy's election.
Right?
So, but these Baptists were pro-Kennedy. So they were kind of leaning away from their church at that time.
But were they pro Sister Martina?
Yes, they were. In fact, they considered a private education to be special, to be superior to the ordinary. Yes, so they felt privileged. In fact, they paid double tuition.
And it wasn't common for Catholic schools to have a kindergarten back then, was it?
That's right, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was sort of latched on, but financially it helped the Catholic school because they paid.
Sure.
They paid double the tuition.
All right, so did you teach a morning session and an afternoon
No,
session?
they were all in the morning.
All in the morning.
And with kindergarten, there's a lot of play involved. And so I would take just the Catholics in the corner and we'd talk about religion. I didn't try to mix them up.
You just, no, you stay over on that side of the room.
No, they were playing and they were painting and doing all that kind of thing while I was teaching religion to those 8.
Was there much suspicion on the part of the non-Catholic parents about what are you telling my kids?
You know, they were very trusting. There was only one parent who came and said, my little boy, I can still see him, I forget his name though, he likes you too much. I think I'm going to take him out. And I didn't know what that meant. Maybe she thought she was losing him.
She was afraid that you were going to baptize him, maybe.
Oh, maybe. But that's what that's the reason she gave. But otherwise, they were very supportive, and my room mothers were Baptists. And at that time, weren't very ecumenical in the Catholic Church, if you remember. When Kennedy became president, it was kind of scary. But they were very trusting.
Yeah. In a way, this had to be kind of enlightening to you, because up until then, you primarily were in a Catholic atmosphere, weren't you?
That's right, and I love to teach religion. So in a way, I was a little disappointed that I couldn't teach religion more.
Yeah.
That I was just making money.
So, how long were you in Oklahoma at that school?
2 years.
Another 2? Was that the norm? 2 years at a time?
For me, it was. For a primary teacher, they just kind of jerked us around.
And what was the next step?
Okay, after I was sent to Nebraska, Beaver City, Nebraska. St. Stephen's, it was called, St. Stephen's, Nebraska. And that was 2 grades, first and second.
Okay.
Yes.
Were you an elementary school teacher all of your teaching career?
All my 20 years, yeah.
Okay, very good. Anything special about that assignment?
Well, that one really was out in the boonies. I mean, it was not even a town. It was just a little village, just a church and a school and maybe 4 houses. It was just out in the country.
My goodness, how many students did you have?
I think I had about 20. There were 3 teachers. We each had about 20. And there was a farming community. The farmers would bring their children.
Now, was that more of a Catholic community than you
It was
had
Catholic
before?
again. Mm-hmm.
And from there, where did you go?
Then I went to Holy Cross Hutchinson. That was a big city, a big Catholic school, just newly formed in Hutchinson. Hutchinson is, it's right next to Wichita. It's pretty big size.
So how big was your class there?
I had 42 first graders.
All one grade.
All one grade.
Was that the first, except for kindergarten?
That
was that
was
the first time you had one grade?
Oh, wait a minute. The first year I had 2 grades. I was there 3 years. And then for the last 2 years, I had just 1 grade, and usually had it in the 40s. That's as many desks as I could put in the room.
Isn't it funny how that is? I mean, a lot of the classes I was in were about that size, and I was in situations where you had more than 1 grade in a room. My goodness, you try and introduce that today, and eyebrows would be raised, wouldn't they?
Well, their children were not that hard to. We had so much family support. You know, families were different.
That makes a difference, doesn't it?
They came from larger families, and they learned to behave.
Yeah.
Well, when you think of it, 42, they were wonderful. I could do so much with them. There was not a problem. Of course, they were white-collared people.
Yeah.
They were not disadvantaged children.
Well, that made things a little easier, I'm sure. So where did you go from there?
Let's see, where did I go? I went to St. Jude in Wichita. And that was my last school. Well, not really. I had 7 years in between after that. Anyway, this was at St. Jude, and I had 3rd grade, just 3rd grade.
Just 3rd grade. You said you had 7 years in between. What did you mean by that?
After St. Jude, I went into a new ministry of parish work. I went to specialized religious education. I went to, I had 6 parishes with another sister. We would go to a different parish every day to teach parents how to teach religion. We catechized, we call it. We helped them to learn to follow the book, how to teach religion, because they had Catholic schools before that, and they closed.
Right. So just to clarify, this was for the situation where you had kids going to a public school, Catholic kids, who...
Yeah, they had to because the school closed.
Exactly. Who needed some form of religious education. And so this was made possible after school hours at the local parish.
That's right.
And you trained adults how to teach those classes.
That's right.
Is that right?
And I did that for 7 years. Yeah, that was rather strenuous, but it was exciting.
So you were teaching adults.
Yes.
That had to be an interesting experience after all that you've been through.
Yeah, sometimes we had to go to the farm to find the person to train.
Did you have a hard time drumming up volunteers for that?
You know, the pastor usually had them picked out before we got there. They were already chosen. I mean, we just came to train. They had already appointed who would do it, who was volunteering.
Any interesting memories from all of that?
Very much, very much. Because during that time, sisters were going through a lot of change in their habit. We were no longer wearing the veil. And of course, that made the people question, why aren't you wearing the veil? Why aren't you wearing this? And we had to explain all of that and all the changes in the church. It was after Vatican II.
Sure.
And so they had a lot of problems about that. And we had to kind of put out the fires and try. They liked us. Some didn't. They thought we should be back in the classroom and make it like it used to be, so that we weren't friends to everybody. but when I think of it now, that they actually were special in getting trained for this, because I know now there's people, nobody training people. They're just walking in without training.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a break for just a moment, but we'll be right back with Sister Martina.
Complicated life.
Hi everyone, don't forget you can purchase DVDs of your favorite shows from OCTV, whether it's Minutes by Minute, Our Community Access, or Connie's Kitchen. Just call the station. Our number is 248-628-9658. And enjoy watching all of our shows on OCTV.
Back with Sister Martina Stegman out here with the Dominican Sisters of Peace. We left off by talking about your last teaching assignment. And, well, actually, there was a period of time before that when you were training adults to teach religion to kids. And that went on for several years, right? 7
years. And then I went into just one parish.
Okay.
And it was a big parish of about 2,000 some families, where we trained catechists just in that one parish. So I was in specialized religious education for the next 4 years in that parish, and then the next 6 years I went to the diocesan office in Salina, Kansas.
And what did you do there?
Then I worked the whole diocese of 100 parishes, training catechists.
They recognized your skills.
Yeah, evidently. So we would have workshops in areas. I remember 9 in the beginning of the year, 9 workshops. We'd go out there, and the diocese was the whole width of Kansas, I-70 all along, 100 parishes.
Well, you got to visit home once in a while.
Well, it was a little bit further south, but I did have a brother that we used to have lunch together once in a while, my oldest brother. Anyway, but that was very exciting. I learned that I could do that so much better without burning out because I didn't have to fill the glue bottles and sharpen the pencils.
Absolutely. You were more of an executive.
Yes, that was easier. So then after 6 years of that, I felt that was enough. They needed new blood. So then I asked for a year of doing something different. I was always leaning towards the spirituality house. But they said, how about going to Africa, to Nigeria?
Boy, that gave you something to think about.
Yes, they all thought it was pretty crazy. But I said, I cannot go there and try it out. I have to know. So I said, why don't you ask the sisters that are there, see if I fit? Well, they thought I could do it. So in 86.
So did they just send ask the sisters there to see if I fit? So what did they do? Send a file over there with a list of your skills?
They knew me.
They knew me. They knew you, okay.
Yeah. Great band, we never were more than 200. We
Right.
knew each other. So I knew their parents. I knew the families. So I trusted that, and I went in June. And I worked among the sisters there for 2 years, teaching these young women. They came with about a 6th grade education.
Okay, so you reach Africa. What hit you over the head when you got off the plane or the boat or whatever and faced your responsibilities?
It was like I had no arms. I mean, I felt totally helpless. I mean, it was just so starkly different. We flew into Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam, the day later, we flew into Nigeria. And as we were landing, it was the dust of the Sahara Desert blowing. I could just see this. We landed there, and at that time, Nigeria was pretty primitive still in the airport. It almost looked like, they had a big megaphone that said, if you take a picture, we will shoot.
That was pretty blunt.
Yes. So there was another little white lady on the plane with me, the rest were all Nigerians, who said, why don't we go together as family? That was so sweet of her, because she could tell that I must have been a little nervous.
Wow.
Traveled by myself. So we went through almost like a cattle trough and got inspected. We had to empty out our suitcases, show what we had, and then I could see another portion, 2 white arms waving, so I knew there'd be somebody there to pick me up, 2 of our sisters.
Was there a threat to the Catholic Church there at that time?
No, they liked the white people because that brought money into the country.
They were worried about someone trying to take over their government, or
No,
what
they
were
were worried about their reputation.
Oh.
That they might look backward.
I see.
I think they didn't want pictures taken to show how crude things were.
So what was your first responsibility there?
Okay, that I was going to teach these 9 women who aspired to be sisters, who wanted to dedicate their lives to God. And so I taught them classes like in church history, liturgy, mass.
Did you have to learn another language to do that?
No, they spoke a British English,
Okay.
so my American English worked. And of course they had a tribal accent that I hardly knew it was English. So it was pretty hard to understand each other, but we got along after a while.
In the course of doing that, were you concerned that these ladies were trying to escape from something or do something?
They were very spiritual. They loved Jesus. I mean, when I always was impressed whenever we read something from the Bible, they could interpret it so well. I think I learned that Jesus wrote for the poor, and the poor could understand it more quickly. So I was impressed with their faith level very much. Mm-hmm. They didn't ever find prayer too long.
And the age group of these women was?
Probably 18, 19, 25.
So they'd completed
30.
their early education.
If they had education.
If they had education.
Yeah, the education is very poor there because there's a riot all the time, you know, where the schools close, and so it's very haphazard.
And were these women, I mean, had many of them lost their parents, or?
Many. Their lifespan is about 47. That's considered a lifespan at that time. So some of them had parents yet and some didn't. But their reason for coming was, I think for one reason, years before that, if they wanted to dedicate their lives to God, they had to go to France or England. There were no convents in Nigeria. So this was saying we sisters had missions there that were clinics, medical clinics. And they said, why don't you start us to be sisters here so we don't have to go to France and England? So that was a request of theirs, to start convents there. So that's what we were trying to do, is to start a convent. And in fact, it's flourishing. It has about 90 sisters now.
Wow. And how long were you there altogether?
Just 2 years.
2 years.
That was considered a term.
What is your biggest memory of your experience there?
Severe weather, very severe. And the poverty of going 8 miles to get water. It was 120 in the shade with no electricity. I mean, we only had 5 hours of electricity a day. So the poverty of that, and the food was so different. I mean, there's very little compared with American food. Grain mush was the diet.
Did much of that change while you were there?
No, not in the 2 years. It's changed now more so.
And if you had to make one comment about your religious experience there, what would it be?
I am glad that I had the chance to experience it. I'd never understand it otherwise. How starkly different cultures are.
A priest once told me that in Africa he could get away with a 2-hour mass a lot easier than he could over here.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find that to be the case?
Oh, yes. If there is a hymn that has 8 verses, they'll want to sing all 8 verses. And I would say, if you do that, I'll sit down. I mean, they can endure a lot more. They love to pray and sing.
Yeah. So what was your next assignment after Nigeria?
For that summer and for the next year, I was supposed to help out at the Spirituality Center at Great Bend. I found it very difficult. It seemed like my chemistry had changed. So much so that sometimes I really felt like I couldn't trust my mind.
Did you miss where you were?
No, I didn't. I was eager to come home. It's just that I think the diet and the experience just did something to me physically.
Now, we're talking about what year approximately?
1988.
Okay.
Into 89. So that year, I kind of had that year at home working with our own sisters.
Okay.
So then I got hired out into a parish for 2 years.
Okay.
Then I went into parish work for about 4 more years before I went to a spirituality house in 2001.
And that's kind of when you started doing what you're doing now?
That's right.
If you had to live your life over again, if you were given that opportunity, would you make any changes?
No, I feel like I had a very full and real satisfying life. I really did. I feel that I was privileged.
Well, we're privileged to have you on our program. Sister Martina Stegman, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next time.
You're watching OCTV, Oxford Community Television, serving Oxford, Addison Township, and the village of Leonard.